First up is how to get Malus Thorm to join you. Malus Thorm, also known as Shar's Scalpel, can be found in the House of Healing in Act 2. However, did you know you can actually make him your ally and he will fight for you? To do this, you'll need to be an oathbreaker paladin who's at least level 8. This is because you can actually just use Control Undead on Malus Thorm. Most of the other Thorms have a condition called Immune to Control Undead, which reads, this creature is so powerful, it simply cannot be controlled by the magical whim of others. But for some reason, Malus Thorm does not have this condition. Funny enough, once he's your ally, he will still cast a spell called Lovely Assistant, which revives one of his assistants. In my case, he revived Vanessa and then immediately killed her, which I thought was hilarious. It would have been cool if Vanessa was revived as an ally as well, but the alternative was funny enough. I brought Malus Thorm to meet Ketheric, and it seems he was really excited to be reunited with his cousin, and Ketheric even got up off his throne and said, "Why am I here?" undoubtedly questioning why he's not with his uncle, Malus Thorm, instead. And next up is the Scythe of Myrkul. This weapon deals 2d12 slashing damage and has the class action Reaper's Scythe, knocking back all targets within a large arc of 10 feet and dealing 4 to 41 damage. Now, besides the amazing class action, which can be used every turn, this weapon is also one of the coolest looking weapons in the entire game. Now, to get this weapon, you'll need to be an Oathbreaker Paladin that has reached level 12 before beginning the Avatar of Myrkul encounter. There are a number of tricks to get to level 12 before the end of Act 2, but it's necessary because after you defeat Ketheric, you'll need to cast Control Undead on the Avatar of Myrkul. Now, surprisingly, it can successfully be cast on it, and once you control it, you'll need to slay it. This causes the Avatar of Myrkul's corpse to remain and become lootable. On its corpse, you'll find the Scythe of Myrkul. Now, unfortunately, this weapon can't actually be equipped without mods, and you can't progress the game if you do this, since you need Ketheric's corpse in order to initiate the cutscene with the Dream Guardian and retrieve the Netherstone. So while you can acquire this scythe, doing so will end your run, and you also won't be able to equip it. But otherwise, it is a really cool looking weapon that most players have probably never found. And next up is a new buff secretly added. This buff is actually really powerful. It grants 10 temporary hit points and causes you to deal an additional 1d4 necrotic damage with weapon attacks, and you gain resistance to cold and necrotic damage. This buff is Myrkul's Gift, which did exist before, but was simply Armor of Agathis renamed Myrkul's Gift. I checked all patch notes and there was no mention of Myrkul's Gift being reworked like this, but it's actually a much better condition now. Even though you lose it once you lose the 10 temporary hit points, it's still great for ranged damage dealers or abjuration wizards who can shield themselves, prevent damage, and keep the condition. And to get Myrkul's Gift, you'll need to head into the Mind Flayer colony at the end of Act 2 and enter the barracks. Once there, talk to Cressa Bone Daughter, pass 2 dialogue checks, one to convince her you're not an invader, and a second to obtain Myrkul's blessing. Once done, anyone in your party can just talk to her again to gain the blessing without passing any more checks. And the condition is much better now, so it's totally worth getting. And next up is secret dialogue you can get if you're missing an eye. Both Malus Thorm and the Owlbear will treat you differently if you're missing one of your eyes. Now, Will is lucky because he's already missing an eye, but to get these options with your Tav, you'll need to have Volo operate on you. This gives you the tag One-Eyed and unlocks related dialogue from it. With the Owlbear, if you also have Speak with Animals on, then you'll get the One-Eyed dialogue option to say that eye, or lack of it, must have you in a lot of pain, I should know. You'll still need to pass a dialogue check afterwards, since the Owlbear replies that scars don't make us kindred nor welcome in her nest, but it is an interesting dialogue option that's easy to miss, since Volo removing your eye would probably be done after already dealing with the Owlbear. And if you are one-eyed when encountering Malus Thorm, he will mention that you are well on your way, but one white orb disfigures you still. Let us finish the cure. And if you recall, Malus had just finished plucking a poor man's eyes out during dialogue, so he is certainly referring to your missing eye and your one white orb being the only eye you have left. And next up is secret Alfira dialogue. During a Dark Urge playthrough, you'll eventually get a cutscene during a long rest where Alfira will appear at your camp. But since there are so many different campsites in the game, would the cutscene be any different depending on which camp you're at? And turns out the answer is yes. Since traveling into the mountain pass forces a long rest, and thus the Alfira scene, that leaves 7 different camps in Act 1 that you can trigger the Alfira scene during a long rest. And of those 7, only one has this unique dialogue, and that camp is in the Shattered Sanctum camp, also known as the Overgrown Chapel campsite. When camping here and long resting during a Dark Urge playthrough, Alfira will appear and you'll unlock the dialogue option to say, "You wandered through the Goblin camp? You must really want to meet me," which makes sense if you're camping in the Shattered Sanctum, the inside of the Goblin camp, and this dialogue option was super surprising to me and is one that most players probably missed. And next up is the Armoured Owlbear Pet. This pet can sunder the earth, causing debris to tear through nearby objects and creatures in an area of effect around the owlbear, knocking targets back. The Armoured Owlbear also has multi-attack, crushing flight, and claws to tear through enemies. And to get the Armoured Owlbear to join you, you'll need to slay the owlbear mother in Act 1, spare the cub, and then rescue the owlbear cub from the goblin camp so it can find its way to your camp. You'll then encounter the owlbear a few more times each long rest, and you'll need to succeed a dialogue check each time to make it a permanent companion at your camp. Then you'll need to make sure to save the tieflings because Dammon needs to survive through the rest of the game, which means you'll need to save the Night Song. Do all this, and during the final fight, you can summon the Armoured Owlbear to fight for you. And it's worth mentioning, if you're already in Act 2 and you didn't slay the owlbear mother in Act 1, you can actually still go back from Act 2 and slay her, let her cub live, and recruit her later, as long as you did not clear the outside of the goblin camp. After you slay the mother, just long rest as usual, and the cub will be with the goblins, and you can free him, and it will appear at your camp during a long rest. You'll still need to pass a few dialogue checks over the next 2 nights, but once you do, you'll have the owlbear cub as a permanent companion at your camp. And it's worth mentioning that the owlbear is one of 2 major characters who can permanently die in the final fight and be removed from the epilogue, which would be unfortunate, and the other character is Zevlor. And next up is an insanely overpowered interaction with Lunar Bestial Vitality, granting nearly infinite hit points. Lunar Bestial Vitality grants 22 temporary hit points after casting a wild shape, and while those temporary hit points are active, reduce all incoming damage by 1. However, this condition is also granted when a Circle of the Stars Druid shifts into Starry form, and as a level 10 Circle of the Stars Druid, you can change forms each turn for free, granting 22 temporary hit points every single turn, which is amazing. But that's not all. Lunar Bestial Vitality is granted from the Armor of Moonbasking, which can be purchased from Voiceless Penitent Bereki. But most OP of all is if a condition is applied to the wearer of this armor after Lunar Vitality has been applied and removed, then the wearer will continuously get Lunar Vitality applied and reapplied extremely fast, giving a permanently refreshing 22 temporary hit points. What this translates to is a permanent shield that reduces all incoming damage by 23, which is actually insanely OP. And next up is Ketheric's Flail of Myrkul. The Flail of Myrkul deals 7 to 17 damage and has tenacity like all flails do, granting bludgeoning damage even if you miss an attack. The flavor text is also interesting. It reads, "A browning piece of brain sticks stubbornly to one of the spikes." The flail also looks really cool and is extremely hidden. The only way to acquire the Flail of Myrkul from Ketheric Thorm is to disarm him during your initial encounter with him and pick up his weapon before he can. Then, when you encounter him for the second time, he will have the Flail of Myrkul equipped, and you can loot it from his corpse once you defeat the Avatar of Myrkul. Since you need to steal his weapon in the first encounter in order to see this flail on his corpse, it's probably something that most players missed. And next up is a hidden interaction with Barnabus. Barnabus is a gnoll that is enslaved by Vanessa within Moonrise Towers. If you talk to Lincella, you can progress the dialogue to the point where you can interfere with her control over Barnabus. If you end up failing the wisdom check, Barnabus will actually just die, and that's the end of the dialogue, which I thought was interesting. But during a Dark Urge playthrough, if you succeed the roll to sever Lincella's connection with Barnabus, after he slays her, you don't need to succeed any additional rolls. Barnabus actually remembers you, and he calls you Lord, and he will even fight for you with the other gnolls when you attack Moonrise Towers with the Harpers. And next up is how to whistle. Every character can actually whistle in Baldur's Gate 3. Now to do this, all you need to do is have unlocked the Perform class action by either being a bard or by helping Alfira with her song in the Emerald Grove in Act 1. Then once you have Perform, all you need to do is make sure you don't have an instrument equipped and perform your class action, and your Perform class action will change into a whistle icon, and when performing, you will now whistle. The songs are the same as if you were performing with an instrument, but instead, now you get to hear your character whistle. And you'll still have all the same effects as if you had an instrument, such as creating crowds or luring guards into your jail cell spell to escape. And next up is a helmet that is secretly stronger than you might think. The Helmet of Smiting reads, when you apply a condition with one of your smite spells, you gain temporary hit points equal to your charisma modifier, which sounds not that great since usually you're just using divine smite on critical strike as a reaction. However, these temporary hit points are also given when causing the frightened condition. This means that a Battlemaster fighter can benefit from the Helm of Smiting when using menacing attack, which possibly causes frightened. While it's still not that great, it certainly opens up the door for more possible uses for this item. The helmet is certainly bugged though because it does not function as described even if you are using spells like Thunderous Smite or Staggering Smite, which do not result in the temporary hit points, and it doesn't say this anywhere on the item, but the temporary hit points only last for 2 turns. And next up is a secret change that makes the Shadow Mastiff Alpha much stronger, and that change is that Terrifying Howl, which the Mastiff uses, no longer causes frightened, but instead applies Fearful, which is arguably much more powerful. Fearful forces the entity to run from the source of its fear and can't take any additional actions. The affected entity also has disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls, whereas Frightened causes the entity to be unable to move and also have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls, but could still attack and even cast spells unimpaired, assuming they don't require an attack roll. So next time you're in the Shadow-Cursed lands and destroy the standing torches imbued with continual flame, be ready for a beefed up Shadow Mastiff Alpha. And it's worth it to slay the Shadow Mastiff Alpha because it drops the Shadow Cloaked Ring, which grants your weapon or unarmed attacks an additional 1d4 damage against creatures made of shadow or creatures that are lightly or heavily obscured. And next up is a hidden interaction with Helldusk boots. These boots are incredibly powerful, granting Hell Crawler, which teleports you to an area and deals 2d8 fire damage where you land and refreshes on short rest. You also can't be forcibly moved by spells or actions and ignore the effects of difficult terrain. You also gain Infernal Evasion, which allows you to spend a reaction to succeed a saving throw if you otherwise failed it. The boots don't mention this, but you also become immune to prone while wearing them, but you also don't ignore the effects of difficult terrain when it comes to deep water or plant growth. But most interestingly of all, these boots control a large number of NPCs. If you loot the boots after Gortash's coronation, all the Steel Watchers and Gortash will become hostile. But if you use a potion of invisibility and sneak through without triggering the coronation cutscene and then loot the boots, you can actually steal them without all the Watchers becoming hostile, and then you can just attend the coronation as usual, but with these amazing boots. You can also loot these boots once Orin is killed if you took Gortash's deal without causing everyone in Worm's Rock Fortress to become hostile. And next up is a hidden armor that is actually amazing. Just wearing this armor allows you to run right through a puzzle within the Gauntlet of Shar and offers other amazing bonuses. This armor is the Mighty Cloth. It also adds +2 to your strength and grants you a class action called Bull Rush, in which you charge forward and possibly knock your foes back 10 feet. It also doesn't provoke opportunity attacks, and it also grants Unwavering Bull. You cannot be pushed against your will, and you have advantage on saving throws against being restrained, which is why you can easily just run up to the Umbral Gem in the Gauntlet of Shar and use it, easily passing the trial without having to remove all the light from the room. And to get the Mighty Cloth, all you have to do is purchase it from Quartermaster Tally and Last Light In.